Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wall Street for Main Street podcast. My name is Mo Daoud, and today's special guest is Nick Sorrentino. He is a co-founder and editor of AgainstCronyCapitalism.org. He's a political and communication consultant with clients across the political spectrum. His work has been featured at Reason.com, NPR.com, Town Hall, The Daily Caller, and many other publications. So, Nick, thank you for joining us.
You're very welcome, Mo. Pleased to be here.
Well, before we get into the economy, can you tell our listeners a little bit about your background and how you started this website?
Sure. My background is in finance, and as the world blew up in 2008, I actually started a business, Accelerix Consultants. I had a feeling that there were two things that were really going to work. One was silver, which was under $10 an ounce at the time. I remember that very, very well. I wish I had just a pile of money. I knew that was going to work. And the other thing was social media. So I founded a company that helps businesses, leverage social media. And believe it or not, it was 2008 was not that long ago, but at the time, businesses had no clue how social media was going to help them, and so for 2 years, I basically, had to preach, the cause, and then suddenly everybody kind of woke up and saw the value of it. Anyway, from that business venture, my partner and I got there, Hunter Lewis, and I got together and decided to found a website that focused on what we saw as a growing problem in the economy, and that is the Crony Capitalism, the idea that business and private special interests collude essentially to line their pockets and to keep other people out. And we definitely saw this emerging in a new way post 2008 crash. And we felt like it was an area that needed attention, and so we decided to look at it very, very closely, and we've been doing it now. We're almost at our third anniversary, which would be July 1.
Okay, great. So let's talk about crony capitalism and the difference between crony capitalism and capitalism, free market. A lot of people, unfortunately, in the mainstream, think capitalism and crony capitalism are the same thing, but actually it's not. Because what we have today, and for the most part, is crony capitalism, where you said that where we have the government and the private sector collide in mutual benefit to help each other. So, can you explain to us the difference between capitalism and crony capitalism?
Sure. Capitalism is the free exchange of goods and services. I have something that you want. You pay me for something that you want that is not as valuable to me. It's a win-win situation. Capitalism creates dynamic markets, creates opportunity. Of course, it also creates peril potentially, but it creates wealth, real tangible wealth from work. Whereas crony capitalism is a fundamentally different creature. Crony capitalism is basically private interests, often corporations, but it can be unions, it can be all sorts of other interests, colluding with the government to get a special deal, a subsidy, a special contract, a licensing regime that shuts out their competition, a million different things. And so crony capitalism is actually the kind of the natural state of things. You always had the king handing out favors to his underlings. Fortunately, this country, we sought to break from that kind of way of thinking. And for the most part, we did. Unfortunately, this crony capitalism, where the government picks winners and losers, is on the rise again. And Hunter and I, consider that a very dangerous development.
And one example of how the government picked winners and losers is the bank bailout that they did after the 2008 financial crisis, where they bailed out Wall Street and the big banks, and the losers were pretty much Main Street and the middle class, where they got punished with high taxation, wealth transfer, and inflation. And unfortunately, the battle is still going on right now, and the Federal Reserve could continue to bail out the banks, and there's no end in sight.
Well, that's true. I mean, as I just posted a piece on Against Crony Capitalism from the Mises Institute, where where basically the person on the video says that we don't have anything close to an honest economy anymore. I mean, the Federal Reserve, the title of the post is the Federal Reserve, prime mover of crony capitalism, and it's absolutely true. The Federal Reserve manipulates prices, manipulates the most important price, which are interest rates. The people who are buying, the big banks, they benefit nicely. They have access to all sorts of liquidity, and they can do all sorts of things in the marketplace. Especially in the financial market, but other places too. Whereas the average person is pretty much shut out. And, there are all sorts of ramifications. We're starting to see inflation bubble up now, even as the economy, the new number, the revised number came out earlier this weekend. We were looking at a 1% contraction annualized in the first quarter, but now we're looking at 2.9%. Annualized contraction in the first quarter. That's no joke. And prices are going up at the same time. Well, the crony class, the people who are connected to the government and the big banks that are too big to fail, I mean, they're sitting pretty. The rest of us, the entrepreneurs, just the business people, the everyday workers, homemakers and so on, we are in not a particularly good position at all, thanks to crony capitalism and the Federal Reserve.
And interest rate is an important part of the economy because that sends signal to business entrepreneurs on how to allocate capital, right?
Absolutely. Prices are a truly miraculous thing. Prices allow millions and millions of people to communicate what is actually true and what is not, what seems almost magically. However, when a central bank comes in and manipulates the price or the interest rates down below where they are naturally, that messes up every other price in the economy. And so everything it's not real. It's based on this kind of a foundation, a false foundation. We're seeing the results of that now.
And that's a good point. And the foundation of this policy that the government's taken on was based on John Keynes, which I know most people out there heard of. And your colleague, Hunter Lewis, wrote a book about him recently, Where Keynes Went Wrong, which I just finished a couple of months ago. Excellent book. I recommend anybody to read that book. If you don't want to read the general theory, but you want to know what he says, Hunter Lewis did a good job breaking down the book line by line for you and showing you what he said was wrong and why. So anyway, so the government economic policy is based on this guy, John Maynard Keynes, who himself wasn't a businessman or entrepreneur. He sounded like a maniac to me with a big ego who thought he could run the whole economy by himself. And he thought that the government should control interest rate, prices, and wages. Otherwise, the economy would collapse and there'd be no chance to survive.
Yeah, the thing is, Keynes is a man of his time. And he was coming out of a period where people thought everything could be engineered. The Industrial Revolution had come along, and people were making planes and cars and all sorts of things. Can't we engineer an economy? And that's really what Keynes believed. I mean, well, that's one of the many things he believed. Um, that idea that the economy, it can be manipulated by the hands of men, that we can, again, going back to that idea of heaven on earth, that can be a reality, is what drove it. Of course, Mises taught us, however, that human action is too complicated to be, engineered from a macro level, and he is absolutely correct, of course.
So let's continue to talk about John Keynes and why his policies became more popular compared to Mises, where his prediction ended up to be correct and John Maynard Keynes' prediction ended up to be incorrect. Is it because John Maynard Keynes was a better marketer than Mises? How come the government took on his policy compared to Mises?
Well, first off, Mises was, during the 30s, it was pretty much on the run. And let me preface this by saying I'm not a Mises scholar, nor am I a scholar in Keynes. I know a fair amount about both of them. My partner is truly a scholar in both places, with regard to both men and their thinking. However, Mises was on the run. The Nazis were on the rise, and he was a Jew, and he's found his way to the United States, like many Jewish folks did during that time. And he came to the United States and sought a position teaching economics, and he eventually got one at NYU, I believe. Forgive me, Hunter. But it wasn't paid for by the university. It was actually paid for by private contributors. The point is, why did Keynes take off? Well, Mises wasn't even in the game when at least in the United States when the Depression was going on and Keynes was paraded around. Now, Keynes, I think, again, was a man of his time. He reflected a fashion, at least as far as I could tell, everything I've read about him, that the academics of the time, they wanted this. They wanted to believe that the calamities which had been brought upon the human race in years prior to Keynes's rise we could solve these problems. And plus, Keynes told the politicians that, hey, it's a good idea to spend money. That's another key point. The politicians have an excuse to spend money, and then this smart guy Keynes is telling them, this academic, it's like, this is good for the economy. Well, hey, that's a win-win as far as politicians are concerned.
And that's a good point. And Keynes' policy is more favorable for politicians because it requires spending money, raising taxes, inflation. And that's all good for politicians. That means they can get more campaign funding, more tax revenue to fund their campaign promises, and etc. Now, going back on crony capitalism, a lot of people ask me, what's the difference between crony capitalism and socialism or fascism? Or are they all the same? What do you think?
That's an interesting and important question. I often say that crony capitalism is really kind of a polite way of talking about soft fascism. Fascism is, the private interests colluding with the government to essentially control the economy. And that is, to a large degree, what crony capitalism is all about, but we're just trying to be polite. Now, socialism has different variants, obviously. But fascism, despite what many socialists believe, is a form of socialism. It is statism. What is traditionally considered socialism by folks that we consider on the left, and then Nazism and fascism generally. For some reason, people started to equate it with the quote-unquote right. Now, the left-right dynamic is just nonsense anyway at this point. Both fascism and socialism, left socialism, are are statism. They're centrally planned philosophies that toss aside the individual for the quote greater good end quote of the population.
And that's a good point. Now, let's shift gears here and talk about the economy. The stock market continued to rise, and yet we look at all the economic indicators, which continue to go negative. You just mentioned the GDP, which has continued to contract. And for the last quarter, if it wasn't for Obamacare, I heard the GDP would have been in negative. So that's how bad the economy is. And then unemployment is still high, despite the mainstream media reporting the manipulated unemployment numbers out there. The real unemployment number, if you want to look at shadowstat.com, is around 23%, which is Great Depression numbers, if you ask me. I don't think the economy is doing very well at all. And then also the graduating class of 2013 and 2014, I heard a statistic that 80% of them cannot find a full-time job. And yet we're still seeing the stock market continue to go up. And yet all the wealth from that has not translated into or blended into the economy and made it better. Why is that?
Because it's fake. No, like I said before, all that money has gone to the big houses in New York, and it goes into the markets and all sorts of stuff. But it doesn't really find its way to the average folks. Although it's now, as far as why the market is rising, I think this is a fascinating time, because it does feel like that the market believes that no matter what happens, the Federal Reserve will come in and save it for sure. Like if we had a 20%, just down, over a few days, I think most people in the market, at least the people who are in it right now, just assume that the Fed will come in and make sure it will put a bottom under it as best it can. And right now, the market, I think, is saying that it thinks that the Fed can do that. Now, the question is, what happens if, for whatever reason, the psychology changes and people start to believe that the Fed can't put a bottom underneath a big downdraft like that? That's the big question, and a lot of people think that the next big downdraft we have will be bigger than the Fed. But as far as I can tell, I don't think that's the general sentiment, in the investing community at this moment. However, that's what I say.
There's a lot of people that think that the Fed tapered the QE so that we could have a market crash, and then everybody will go back and look at the Federal Reserve to try to save the day again and expand QE, maybe even more than what it was before. What do you say to that?
I think, honestly, nothing shocks the Federal Reserve more. I mean, the Fed it's just pushed all this liquidity out into the world, and now it's trying to quote mop, trying to exit out of this, insane. It's not really even an exit, but sort of go another way. Out of to basically change gears from the experiment that QE was, at least as we have known it. Because it knows it's dangerous and it needs to get out as soon as it can. But nobody knows how it's going to happen. If it's going to happen, what's going to happen basically nobody knows. Right now, the sentiment is, however, that if things go haywire, the Fed will come in and save the day.
I agree with you there. One of the reasons why we don't have growth in this economy is because the private sector is shrinking, and yet the public sector is getting bigger. So big government is getting bigger. You can see since the 2008 financial crisis, there's more federal agencies we have now than before. And then also you look at the unemployment numbers, and it's increasing, which indicates that the private sector is not hiring like they should in the past. And also I saw a post on your website showing that in 2014, Americans going to pay more taxes than food, clothing, and housing combined, which is insane. So a lot of the wealth and income that the hard-working Americans earned is going to the government so they can fund their social programs and the wars, and etc.
Well,
Do you think this is...
sorry, go ahead, Bob.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, no, you're right. It's funny. I was having a conversation with somebody who is, generally I agree with on a lot of issues, but probably wouldn't call himself a libertarian by any means. We were talking about taxes. And, fundamentally for people who, are maybe not as into things as you and I are, Mo, they want value for what they're paying for. Now, they're forced to pay taxes, but if they're going to be forced, they at least want something for their money. Now, you and I recognize, the inherent, immorality of taxation fundamentally, but, a lot of folks are like, well, hey, okay, well, where's my bridge? Or where's whatever? Well, we've reached a point where the average person pays their taxes out of fear alone. They don't want to get audited. And it's essentially just a black hole. There's no feeling of like, oh, well, in eras, I think there were Americans who said, oh, well, I pay my taxes and it goes into such and whatever. And you could make an argument for that. But now it's just down a hole, forever gone, no value. Your money, the money you work for, is gone and taken from you because the government said we want it. And that's how a lot of Americans feel.
Right. A lot of people say, well, without the government, who's going to build the roads or the bridges? Are you going to do it? I don't think the private sector is going to do it. They're going to probably charge you a lot of money to get that done.
Yeah,
but
well, who will build the roads? The road companies will build the roads.
Exactly. Actually, that's how it was when automobile was starting to come around. The private sector actually built the roads.
Absolutely. I mean, somebody I saw somewhere, has a bet out there. It's like, show me something that the private sector can't solve. And the private sector, we are conditioned to believe that cannot be solved by the private sector by non-coercive means. Right. And the truth is, so many things could be solved, or so many challenges that we deal with day to day could be solved if the private sector was allowed into these areas of opacity.
And I agree. So if the government wasn't so involved in the medical industry, maybe by now we have cure for cancer, AIDS, and other deadly diseases. Maybe.
Very possible. On the other hand, of course, the classic argument is, well, we've got the NIH out there searching for cure for cancer and so on. Like, truly, if you allowed the market to work as it could, I think it is very possible that we would see many more cures than we have currently.
So one final question before I let you go is, what do you think the output or result of all this political and economic mess that we're in right now? Do you think the Libertarian Party will rise and perhaps take the Senate or Congress in the near future, or maybe a different party will come around and take over? Or do you think there'll be a social collapse, an economic collapse?
Well, I certainly hope there isn't a collapse. That's not good for anybody. Nobody wants chaos in the streets. That is not good for the economy. It's not good for everyone. And by the way, I'm a libertarian with a small L. I'm not a representative of the Libertarian Party. I just believe in teeny tiny government. That's what I am. Now, I do think that there is a trend, unlike any other time in this country, toward that sort of thinking. I think a lot of people are waking up to the idea of live and let live, fundamental tenets of libertarianism. Just let me live my life. As long as I don't disturb you, leave me alone. It's not a crazy concept, and it's a concept which we embraced in this country for years and years. I feel better. I have serious hope for the future. I see young people who increasingly understand, the tenets of freedom and liberty, both on the economic front and on the personal front, and frankly, the smart people in politics are in this movement. 100 years ago, they were in the Marxist movement. That is no longer the case. Now, the smart people are pulling for freedom. At least, in my opinion, the smartest political people. Of course, I'm a little biased. So, I don't see them taking over the Senate anytime soon, but I think we're making headway.
Okay, Nick, well, thank you for your time. If people want to find out more about your work, where can they go?
Go to againstcronycapitalism.org. You can go to our Facebook page. You've got 153,000 followers. Or you can always follow me also on Twitter at Liberty and Econ or at Against Crony Cap.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Nick, and hopefully you can come back on again soon.
My pleasure, Mo. Nice talking with you.